Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So welcome to this talk. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Alia Al Shamsi. I'm a writer and an artist from the UAE. And with me is this amazing panel. If you allow me, just before we start, I'd just like to say a word of solidarity with our Arab brothers and sisters who are going through very difficult times at the moment. Our prayers are with them. So we start with Dr. Khawla Al Marri. Dr. Khawla Al Marri is an Emirati cultural researcher and writer based in Doha. Her academic interests include the history of the Arabian Gulf and its cultural heritage and identity. Dr. Khawla Al Marri is the author of Heroes and Villains, A Conversation Between Evil and Good in the Middle East, 2019, and Interview with a Collector, A Closer Look at Qatari Collectors and Their Stories, 2021, in cooperation with the National Museum of Qatar. Next to Dr. Khawla is Zeinab Al Hashimi. Zeinab is an Emirati conceptual artist specializing in site-specific installations and public art. Captivated by the UAE's rapid transformation into a global industrial powerhouse, Al-Hashimi challenges spectators' perspective by deconstructing their familiar surroundings through experimental installations. By blending natural and artificial elements, her work highlights the impact of human intervention on the environment and invites viewers to reconsider their relationship with their surroundings. Her artworks have been displayed at numerous exhibitions and events, including participation in the Richard Mill Art Prize exhibition at Louvre Abu Dhabi, Art d'Egypte, second edition, Pyramids of Giza in 2022, Mirage Desert Al-Ula, KSA in 2022. Constructivism, We See Things As We Are, Layla Heller Gallery, Dubai in 2022. Tekween Sustainability Pavilion Expo 2020, Dubai in 2021. MashaAllah. Al-Hashimi was also an artist in residence at the Seti Institute, Montalvo Art Center, San Francisco in 2018. And she's received her BA from Zayed University in 2010. Okay. And finally, we have Shamma Al Mheiri, who is an Emirati curator and art history researcher with a focus on modern and contemporary art, and Emirati art, archaeology, and cultural institutes. She holds an MA in art history and museum studies and a double bachelor in philosophy and sociology from the Sorbonne University of Abu Dhabi. She has joined the art sector in Dubai Culture and Arts Authority in 2021 as a senior officer, where she gained experience in project management and on-ground experience with experts from both the private and the public sectors in the creative industries. Al Mheiri has also curated in several in-house exhibitions, including the 10th edition of Sikka Art and Design Festival, the region's largest art festival with a focus on emerging creatives. In 2023, she undertook a short-term work placement at the curatorial department in the Near East Antiquities of Louvre Museum in Paris. Today, she dedicates her time in supporting emerging and upcoming creatives locally, while simultaneously working on archiving and researching contemporary art from the United Arab Emirates. So we will start maybe with Dr. Khawla on your key points on this talk about Arab art, and then looking maybe specifically into the region, and then, more focused on the Emirati art scene. Some of the key points that you have through your research, your extensive research on this topic, and the impact of the global on the local and the local on the global. So I will hand it over to you, Dr. Khawla, for your notes, and I'll be switching through the presentation.
During my studying years, I was the only Arab in my class. And it was a doctorate program, and I was the youngest and the only Arab. And there was a colleague of mine who was from the Netherlands, and he came and asked me a question about Arabs. I was the doorway to the Arab world to them. So he asked me a question. He said, Khawla, how can I understand Arabs? And I didn't understand the question. I said, what do you mean? He said, no, how do I understand Arabs? Like, what should I do? What should I read? What should I look at? And I said, well, we're emotional. We're very emotional. We need to understand that. And for you to understand our emotions, you need to look at our productions. So you need to look at our TV productions. You need to look at series. You need to look at theater. You need to understand our poetry. You need to understand our art. And if you really want to know how we feel, you really need to look at our art. And if we're going to talk from an Emirati perspective, we have 4 elements that we really connect with in terms of Emirati art. So, for example, the first element that we look at is land. Land, for us Arabs, it means motherhood. We always say in Arabic, al-watan al-um, which is motherland. So motherland, what does it mean to us, motherhood? So motherhood, for example, in Wheels of Time by artist Budur Al-Ali, speaks about how mother is the soul of of the heart of a house. And then when we look at land, we also, it branches into another definition, which is security. So as you can see, forts are always in our paintings. For example, the fort by artist Faisal Abdel Qadir. So it's always motherhood and security. So the second element is, for example, a date tree. A date tree equals life and growth. You can see here The Climb, which is by artist Roda Hamad, who is also represented by Iris projects here, who are the representative here. I remember my late grandfather, he used to live in Al-Ain for quite some time. And he would say, Al-Ain Jannah, like Al-Ain is an oasis, it's like a garden of Eden, because of all of the palm trees and date trees. Not to mention that the late Sheikh Zayed, which is the founder of the UAE and the first president in the UAE, established the first national museum in Al-Ain, which is the Al-Ain National Museum. And they had a big section on palm trees, date trees, I mean. And the late Sheikh focused on, the history of the date tree, because in Al-Ain, people were very interested in agriculture. They were interested in agriculture and farming, so a tree is really, a very big symbol to them. And the third element, which is boats, we always see boats, and I think boats is not only linked to the UAE, but also linked to the GCC region. So boat is economy, boat is pearls, boat is fishing, and boat is economy when it was the oil era. So the boat also brought us, oil barrels, and in exchange. And this is a painting by artist Abdel Qadir Al-Rayis, which was a boat on water. Number 4. Number 4, which is the falcon, which is one of the important national elements that we see in Emirati art. So falcon is always a vision and always linked to strength. Not only that, we see falcon influencing a lot of also designs. For example, we have the Zayed National Museum, which is also, looks like a falcon that's about to fly. So it's also, taken from a national element. And also, we have the UAE Pavilion, which was in Expo 2020, and also it looked like a falcon. This is what I can say about the 4 elements that we see. And now and then, we can go into regional elements later and also regional projects.
Thank you, Dr. Khawla, for this amazing insight on the visual language of the region when it comes to expression of art. And you touched very quickly on institution and the roles of institution, but we'll come back to you later to expand on that. With Zeinab, do you want to actually continue on first with the, can we continue with the institution before we go back?
So I was very interested when it comes to Arab art and local art and endorsing it. We look at institutions around us. Many institutions are transforming, landmark buildings into spaces for artists or spaces that actually fosters Arab art or local art. For example, if we look at the GCC, we first look at Tashkil. Tashkil is in art studios. It creates projects for artists. It has exhibitions as well, and it was founded by Sheikha Latifa bint Maktoum Al Maktoum. I remember Tashkil very well. I was a very young girl, and Tashkil building was actually a supermarket when it first started. This is why I say it's very important to look at the transforming historical landmarks into art spaces, because you can see the history in the building itself. It's not only something that forces Arabic. There is a history that comes with it. And the second one is Doha Fire Station, which is, it was a fire station building, but then they realized that artists need residencies in Qatar. So they decided to keep the exterior, take everything inside. They took the whole, offices and everything inside and created artist studios for artists. Now there is a residency that is part of Doha Fire Station, which is a 9-month residency. 10 artists that should be local artists, and 10 artists that can be non-Qatari artists, but they can be residents of Qatar. And after those 9 months, they have to create an exhibition, and the Qatar museums would buy one of the paintings or the artwork that they produce. We have Mathaf. Mathaf is the Arab Museum of Modern Art in Qatar. It embraces Arab art. It has art from the region. It has art from Emirates. They have Hassan Sharif. They have an artist from Qatar called Jassim Zaini. They have an artist, for example, from Iraq, who is Diya Al-Zawi. They have artists from Egypt, which is by Mahmoud Saeed. And they have, for example, artists from Morocco, which is like Mohammed Melehi. And what's interesting about Mathaf is that it's not just a home for Arab artists. It also has a research center, a library, that also they managed to create an encyclopedia about Arab artists, which is one of the important things that you as an outsider or someone from other regions, you would go into that encyclopedia and know more about Arab artists' history. And research is very important because it creates that dialogue and connection with other institutions. And this is what I can say about Mathaf. These are one of the few paintings that they have, which is Red Sky with Birds by Iraqi artist Diya Al-Zawi, and they have also a painting which is titled Unknown by artist Mahmoud Saeed from Egypt.
Thank you, Dr. Khawla. It's very insightful also to know the different institutions, whether they're in the form of museums or galleries or residencies. So it sort of continues on this sort of the story and the narrative, and it's now also housed. A lot of these artists, are now no longer with us. So it's very important also that a lot of their works are archived, but also their meaning, within the contemporary scene and supporting the emerging artists of the region. And one of our amazing and established artists here in the UAE, Zeinab Al Hashimi, I think it's very interesting to hear a little bit about your practice. First of all, it's quite particular, and we were talking earlier about the different relationships it has with the space itself, and it's quite interesting also perhaps to touch on how it can differ here in the UAE than when it's exhibited abroad. I leave it to you.
Thank you, Alia. Thank you, Dr. Khawla. And thanks for everyone for being here. I think if we want to touch base on the institution part where Khawla mentioned a few, I would also go back. I never saw Tashkil as a supermarket because that was not my neighborhood. But I do remember being in Tashkil before it was Tashkil. It was actually called Latifa College. And there were 11 girls that graduated, including Her Highness Sheikh Latifa. I graduated from Zayed University on the same year, and I remember there comes to the question of like a graduating artist. People ask you, what are you going to do next? And I think back in 2009, finding the courage and the platform and the ability to say, I'm going to be a full-time artist was a little bit intimidating. But thanks to a lot of institutions, thanks to a lot of, like, I would say, the flourishing of art in the region, including Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah, there was quite a few opportunities, quite many opportunities for, let's say, creatives to be taking their roles of exploration. There was a sponsorship of even traveling abroad and doing certain residencies. I do remember being in, I graduated as a multimedia designer, actually, with a focus in visual arts. So I kind of wanted to play around with so many different mediums. I always said that my work is experimental just because it's a trial and error. There was so many things I didn't understand about myself and my work and what is it that I actually wanted to create before I started bringing in the DNA of my work. What makes me different from other artists, but also what makes us similar, I think, as Arab artists. And I think I do remember still traveling to London. It was actually sponsored by Tashkil, and exploring the yourself as an artist in a global or like an international context. And I feel like all of a sudden, when you're in your community, when you're in your town, between your people and familiar faces, it's very easy to try to be more trying to fit into the Western art or like the global art, trying to relate your work into famous artists or like references. Even sometimes when you write your statements, you try to find a global reference. You try to find in the art history, which was taught back in university from a Western point of view. And I still remember that. I always, and I still say that I like to go back to the School of Art of Bauhaus. I like brutal architecture. I like artists who used certain like geometry in their work. And I would always try to find a Western reference. But the minute I feel like I started looking out and traveling abroad to represent myself and represent my identity, I felt more in tune to be very comfortable with my actually, who are my family and what do we do, and like telling people stories actually, rather than the art references. It started becoming more of just wanting to show more about my identity, even being, I think, I still remember, so aside from the history of traveling into different art fairs and different places around the world, then came the part where I would actually take part in my art installations as an individual and not as a group. And I think it also started becoming quite more interesting for me to represent my country and be the only Arab in a certain global context. And I think through that, it made me realize that in those years, I was experimenting in a way to try to fit into the global context. But then when I started being in the global context, I felt like I would like to keep myself simple. My art is about finding a way to communicate my expressions. My art is a reflection of what I see on my daily life and lifestyle in my city. My picked up materials are materials that actually reflect my identity. It reflects the transformation. It does show how I am just a vessel trying to communicate like what I see in front of me. So if we want to talk a little bit about a few of the global or like international commissions or events, the work over here is part of the event or the art event called Art the Egypt, which is in Cairo. And I still remember that when I got the invitation, I instantly felt like I was connected to create a certain shape, a certain site specific related to Egypt, related to related to Giza. But then I had already my DNA of my elements of materiality, and I like to sort of like express myself with my materials. So picking up camel hide, using the camel hide, which started at an earlier stage back in 2015, to have to represent myself again in the position of having this sort of material with the shape of an obelisk. Of course, after doing a little bit of research, I realized that there is a story about the unfinished obelisk. The unfinished obelisk is still in Aswan. And then I wanted to recreate that story by recreating an obelisk that was half finished and half done. If you can go to the next picture. And over here, this is where I think this is a very interesting resemblance of the synergy of my work around its environment. So you see the obelisk, which is like a shape that is known for the ancient Egyptians. And then you see the camels, which are probably, they've been there for many, many years, for hundreds of years, as part of that environment. Now, the difference here is that I always try to tell the story about man-made versus nature, industrial versus traditional. And I think the work kind of gives you a hint of that sort of like timeless in it, like it captures things from different times. This work over here was for Al-Ula 2022, and the Desert X, again, the material is turning into a new shape here, and the shape right now here is a rock formation, which blends very well with the environment. And I think I try to mimic nature, or I think as human beings, that's what we do. We mimic nature all the time, but we think that as creatives, as creators, we think that we own that sort of image or visual or identity, but sometimes it's really like a reflection of our world. My recent installation and commission was at the Thesis Temple in Vienna. And the Thesis Temple had basically on a yearly basis, they commission an artist. And for this past year, they actually have historical art exhibition related to camels, and it was called On the Back of a Camel. So the curators were actually trying to look for artists who work closely with the camel hides and camels, and there was that invitation. And again, I think instantly when I saw the site, I felt again related to my identity and the story that I wanted to tell. In this specific work, actually, those are oil barrels, so it kind of relates to the identity of the Arabian Peninsula, the GCC, or the oil barrel, or like the oil industry, and the discovery of oil is something that we cannot deny that is part of our identity. And it kind of gave me sort of like pride to tell that story from my own perspective. So we can imagine camel caravan walking from the desert, from Al-Ula to Cairo to Giza, and now it's sitting in Vienna and the transformation right now are oil barrels. So honestly, I don't know how my ability to understand what is the shape related to site-specific, but it's just very intuitive. It comes with maybe a few years of practice and trying to really understand the stories I want to tell through my work. And yeah, the show is still actually in Vienna. It was going on for the past 6 months. And I think I'm quite happy and thrilled to always be able that there was sponsorship and support through the years with to participate globally. And now it becomes a little bit different when the participation becomes coming from the museum itself or the art exhibition directly to the artist. It gives you a bit of like a responsibility and yeah, a great way of representing yourself and your identity.
Thank you, Zeinab. That was very insightful. Also, your transition from how you sort of built your own narrative and your own visual language and how you speak about your work is quite interesting. And moving on to you, Shamma, I think this is a great transition. Knowing, and correct me if I'm wrong, your thesis was about contemporary artists from the UAE. As well, I'm sure you've also been able to do a lot of research on the visual language and self-expression and how it sort of is it, you know, is it within the global contemporary narrative? Is it very distinct? Does it have its own sort of school of thoughts?
Thank you, Alia. Firstly, I'm very grateful to be sharing the stage with wonderful ladies, each with their own insightful approach. I think this question, Alia, is very relevant because this was exactly why I chose to focus on this topic for my thesis. And when asked to join this panel with the ladies and reading the title of Porous Paradigms, you think of inspiration or sources where artists would, you know, find their creative approach. And this is why almost a year ago today, I defended my thesis on the absence and emergence of art museums in the United Arab Emirates and its influence on the contemporary art movement locally with Emirati artists or locally based artists in general. And automatically, I think, as a researcher, you go throughout the chronological approach of inspiration throughout an artist's life, and you think of the predecessors and where they find their sources of inspiration. Contemporary art, you know, usually people would date from the 60s onwards or after that, and this was exactly the time period where Emirati artists were granted the opportunity via the Ministry of Education to go abroad and get their scholarships from neighboring countries. And they were all Arab countries, mostly Arab countries. Some went to Italy, some went to Russia and Moscow. And in this case, I'm talking about Gulf artists in general. This was primarily, I think, the starting point for the research. And automatically you think of where they source their inspirations. If we talk about it from an academic point of view, if you go to the fine arts academies in Egypt and Iraq, you start with the Western approaches and the Western teachings of how to start your artwork and your art practice when it comes to the fine arts specifically. So that's how primarily most of them, Emirati artists, were taught to think. And it was up to them to create their own Emirati identity upon returning to their own home countries. I think also another inspirational, I think, journey would be to mention, you know, renowned first-generation contemporary artist Abdelkader al-Rais's works of art. He talks about his time in Kuwait whenever he was living there with his sister and her husband. At the ages of 15 and 16, he was heavily inspired by the Renaissance artists. And if you look at his early works, that's what you'd be able to see. You'd see their faces, you'd see their hand postures and their gestures, and that was a heavily, it was a notable feature of his works. And then you look at artists like Fatima Luta, who was taught performing arts and the fine arts in Iraq, and then went on to practice in Italy. She had a very different approach on what we were used to doing in terms of performing arts in the UAE. to the likes of, I can go on and on with the names, Dr. Muhammad Yusuf, Dr. Najat Makki, with her academic approach of what she was taught in terms of sculpting and coin designs and bringing that back to the UAE. So they all came back to the UAE with this idea of what do we represent and what does our country need in terms of art movements? How can we create our own distinct art movements? And to touch on Zeinab's comments regarding, I think, the environment and what's deeply rooted in our culture, a lot of them looked at the earth as a source of inspiration. I looked personally at the role of institutes in forming that kind of contemporary art movement. And in an absence of an art museum, you had the heritage museums or the archaeological museums, which were heavily based on ethnographic approaches or very heritage Emirati falcons and camels and the archaeological sites. And we see that influence in their early art movements. With Dr. Muhammad Yusuf, you have his sculpture works that were obviously inspired by the UAE heritage. He had paper maches on canvases. He did a lot of, theatrical works with the animal movements that were very inspired by the UAE. So I think that was a very interesting direction when considering where they get their sources of inspiration. And if we look at the Arab art history in general, when we're talking about the Iraqi artists or the Egyptian artists that worked side by side with the Emirati artists, a lot of them also carried this burden of representation. And I think a lot of artists, even today, correct me if I'm wrong, Zainab, but you have this idea of the burden of an artist. What we represent, do we represent our nationality? Do we represent our religion? Do we represent our environment? Should we even be carrying this burden? Are we a singular work of art or are we a collective work of art? And a lot of the first generation Emirati artists looked at it this way. They practiced art for the sake of whether they were commissioned by the government for a National Day event or expos. And it was very interesting to see how upon their arrival, they all founded their own groups, community groups or collective groups, whether it was the Emirates Fine Art Society in the late 80s or the first Sharjah Art Biennales as well in the late 80s. But parallel to that, it's also important to think of the exhibition spaces or the platforms that they had to showcase their works of art. The early artists always remember being given the space of the Sharjah Expo, which is until today used for many different approaches. The jewelry fairs, the jewelry shows, and even the artists themselves remember how these spaces kind of turned the perspective of the general audiences that came to shop, usually at the Sharjah Expos. They would walk into the artist booths and look at artworks and be like, okay, but where can I buy the plates and the pans and the pots? So it's very interesting to see how the alternative spaces also shifted the narrative for the contemporary art movements. That's also one thing to note. A lot of them were also given the public libraries, which is also a very important pillar for the contemporary art movements. Muhammad Kadhim was actually given the library of Khawla by Hassan Sharif as a platform to showcase his first solo show as a teenager back in 1992. So you think of how these alternative spaces that were not meant to be art museums necessarily showcase their works and how beneficial they could be for these artists. I look back at the government's works in general. We're very lucky, in each and every emirate almost you have a governing entity that's responsible for the arts and culture and incentives and motives. We also have the federal initiatives. The Ministry of Culture does a lot as well to offer these platforms. Ever since the assigning of a CEO of Arts and Culture at Dubai Culture, we've started curating, once again, fine art exhibitions or art exhibitions in general in the public libraries. And we've seen a lot of demand for the contemporary artists to showcase there. But also we're very lucky to have initiatives such as, for instance, the Dubai Collection, which was launched a few years ago, and heavily dependent on His Royal Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid's own personal and private art collection. which a lot of people did not know he owned or he had. And they were showcased for the very first time publicly. A lot of them are scanned and provided online for public view on dubaicollection.ae. But also they were also exhibited at the Etihad Museum back in 2021 as a part of an exhibition that was curated by Nada Shabout, heavily dependent on his personal private collection. A lot of them are modern and Arab artworks. So I think this shows how there is a movement for government effects and incentives, but you also have collectors that are based in Dubai that are collecting these artworks without any necessary incentive pushing them to collect Emirati or Arab art in general. Why are they collecting today in the Emirate of Dubai? Why are they showcasing and giving their works as loans to the Dubai collection? There is an interest. There is a very prominent direction. Whether it's on the private sector or the public sector. And I think this is something to be noted as well when it comes to the influences that we see across disciplines, across movements. The UAE today and the Arab world in general practices all art movements. We can't neglect, we need to mention this. There isn't one specific art movement that the UAE is known for. We have the conceptual artists, we have the multidisciplinary artists, we have the sculpture works, the public arts. So it is a very interesting topic, and I think we're just scratching the surface when it comes to this.
Thank you, Shamma. That was very insightful. And I think one thing that you've mentioned, for example, in terms of Nada Shabout, who curated one of the first exhibitions, and coming back to you, Dr. Khawla, when you're talking about the encyclopedia, of the artists that is being done, and all these great efforts. For me, I have a sort of a question in terms of, in the past, a lot of the artwork was curated perhaps by non-Emirati or perhaps non-Arab curators, and or written, let's say some articles written about them by, someone who maybe is not necessarily from this but has lived here. And of course, where it's very important to have a diverse range of perspectives, it is also equally important to have our voice represented when it comes to interpretation, just as the three of you have done so. My question is, there's a lot of institutions that are now going back and re-looking at art and reinterpreting things. Is that so in the case of Emirati art? Do we look back, do we try to reinterpret things, or are we looking at the contemporary and today and, focusing more on today and the future?
I think for me, I feel that, for example, if we have archives like the National Archive, maybe it's like one of the sources that we could use as a tool to maybe speak about, Emirati artwork from the 60s and 70s, from an Emirati perspective, because then you have specialists now who are Emirati or from the region who have these tools, who have the knowledge, who have, scholarship on this topic. So maybe that is one tool. For example, when I spoke about the encyclopedia and madhaf, it was very interesting, especially for students who are from the region, because then they have this resource, because they had a lack of resource when it came to Arab art. They didn't know where to read about it. They would go through books, but they wouldn't have just one place that has all the resources that they needed, all the information. So that made things easier for them academically, from an academic perspective. And I feel that I actually looked at the encyclopedias and I saw how, that project changed a lot of things, because it also came from an Arab perspective, because the scholars who also worked on it were Arabs. As Emirati art, I remember having this discussion with you, Alia, and I remember us saying, for example, if we go back and look at an old painting by an Emirati artist, and we look at the caption, what would happen if we had that caption, again written by an Emirati now who's an expert in this field? How would that caption now, be read like or look like, because then you have someone who is from the region and, they have this sense of belonging, and then they can relate to the art from emotional side, And that was, a conversation that triggered me, because really now if we look at this, many things would change really.
Maybe I could add just a little bit about the fact that I think going back a little bit in the education system, we would realize, like at least with artists from my generation, slightly younger, that we were taught about art history. We had a lot of art practice or like workshop related to different, let's say, painting, photography. There was sculptures, but the references were always international, or like, let's say, masters. Like you would know about Picasso and Michelangelo, and you read a lot about, the different Western movements, and you kind of have a sort of like a comparison in your, like very humble artist work of trying to really understand yourself in this world, into those sort of relations to your work. And I think as I graduated, I think slowly, I'm talking about like 2009, so it was probably the third, fourth edition of Art Dubai. I'm sorry if I'm not right with the timing, but let's say a few years of Art Dubai. Art Abu Dhabi was still, flourishing as well. The time where we went to those fairs and understood the galleries and the representations of Arab art, I still remember that Arab artists that were represented in certain galleries were the artists who their expression was about political issues, but also it made so much sense, because I was, as a young person, I was also relating to those Arab countries, and I could understand. But I did have the question and intimidation of what gallery would pick me up. Like, how would a gallery be interested in my work? Because again, like as an artist, you want to be recognized globally, and you want to be maybe picked by a gallery. I'm not talking on behalf of all the artists, but some artists want to be picked by a gallery and represented. So I think I was trying to shape my my work based on those different contrasts with like big masters and what is considered Arab art, and not just Emirati art. So to me, Emirati art was, again, something that I started learning about later on, I would say somewhere between the years 2010 onwards, where I discovered the fives of the late Hassan Sharif. Muhammad Kadhim is like my mentor today. But that was not taught in education. And I think today's, like a lot of my friends are also now my artist friends who are actually teaching in university are teaching the younger generation about the Arab identity and Arab art, and also the founders of like contemporary art in the UAE, which is very, very important in my opinion. There's a part of belonging, relation, and I still remember as a younger person, not many years ago, but like when I first started the installation, someone asked me, told me actually, Hassan Sharif does that, and Hussein Sharif does that, and I was like, why do I not know so much about them? And you can't say the same thing today. I mean, everyone has to know those founders of contemporary art. So yeah, I think education is important. Try to relate yourself in that context.
Yeah, having the resources as well, and having that available, like you said, within also an educational system, also enriches it in itself. There was this concept between the collective and the individualistic that keeps coming up as well. Are we looking at ourselves under, the Arab identity, or are we looking at ourselves as individuals, or more of the contemporary, global contemporary? Shamma, what can you see from the current, let's say, emerging and more established artist? Is it more of a collective Or is it sort of now breaking into more of individuals doing different things?
I mean, they all, at some point, they all exist in parallel senses and synonymously in most cases. Whether an artist was presented in a group show, you would look at it as an Emirati exhibition. Recently, we had the Encounters exhibition that was curated by Alia Al at Art Dubai earlier this year as a part of the Dubai collection, and all of them were Emirati artists, but owned by distinct nationalities, each in their diverse respects. But what I think triggered, and what Alia did very nicely in this exhibition during her curation, is that she managed to represent each and every single art practice done by an Emirati in an own individualistic approach. So people came into the exhibition knowing that it was a collective Emirati exhibition, but standing in front of each and every piece, you saw a diverse relation. And I think it comes down to the context of where these artworks are exhibited. Like as an example, I can perhaps highlight, and I don't mean to say this because I curated the show, but earlier this year I was asked by Afia Gallery to curate a show for one Emirati artist and a Kenyan artist together on the same page. And as an Emirati, initially, I had to highlight the Emirati artist in his own respect, but also you have visitors coming in from the international level who have no idea who Dr. Muhammad Yusuf is, for instance, who is the artist at the exhibition, next to Maggie Otieno, and kind of take a step back and look at it from an objective point of view. What does his artwork stand to represent today and say about his own individual practice? Because people would come in with a collective impression of what an Emirati artist is, what he practices, whether installation art or public art or in any sense. But then putting two different artists from two different continents together side by side really highlighted how we perceive and how we, even as a curator or an art historian or a visitor, as an audience member, see those works. And the minute we did that for the exhibition, people started confusing the artworks between the Kenyan artwork and the Marathi artwork. So what does that really say in essence? And I think as much as I would like to answer this question with one clear answer, I think it is very hard, and it would come down to the context of the show, the context of the exhibition, where the artwork is placed. And I think Zeinab gave two beautiful examples of her artworks being placed in distinct contexts, alone, not next to any other artwork. And I think this helps the viewer kind of understand a bit further what is beyond the collective as an Emirati collective, or an Arab artist in general, and how we see the work in essence and what it stands to represent today.
I remembered something, Alia. I remembered a Saudi scholar who asked me this question because you mentioned how are we categorized under culture? We're always identity are we linked to that all the time because we're Arabs or we're from the region? We're linked to elements, and I feel sometimes yes, we're always in a way linked to elements. But I remember this question from this Saudi scholar who said, Khawla, how do we discuss in art a culture within a culture? I said, what is a culture within a culture? He said, the things that we don't know how to explain within our culture, sometimes they're very difficult to explain. And then I said, yes, I remember an example, which was, in this region, especially in Saudi, a man cannot, say his mom's name. That's like a taboo. There was a time when it's not allowed to say your mom's name if you're a male, or your sister's name, or your still is the case sometimes, or your daughter's name. It was like a taboo. And I said, well, I remember a Saudi artist, Manal Doyan, if you remember her, who had an installation where she, discussed this issue, and she had to go through, a lot of girls' schools and had them write their names as females. And she had that installation on, and I remember telling him that once that installation was on, and there was also a dialogue because of all social media. Social media is something that we look at on a daily basis. And I remember when that topic, was brought up on social media as well. His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the UAE, actually tweeted his mother's name. And this is when we discussed as well, when you discuss art, and especially Arab art, and when you link it with a culture within a culture discussion, even role models, Arab role models, our leaders, are examples that we look at when it comes to also art, or a discussion of art, because that was also an example that endorsed this conversation.
Sorry, can I ask one specific question related to this from Zainab? Zainab, I know your work. But is it like so much pressure on your shoulder and challenge each time you're doing an artwork? You have to say, is this an Emirati identity? I mean, I don't think any other nationalities question that. You're an artist, you're creative, you're influenced by what's happening around you, and that's what it tells you. I mean, that's how you create. Having this pressure and intensity of, is this Emirati identity, is this related to my identity, this is such a huge, huge pressure on your shoulder.
Thank you. I think that's a very valid and interesting question to answer. I think I had the conversation with a friend of mine here about sometimes how not only identity, but in many cases, looking at the art scene and the creative scene, certain themes are there in certain exhibitions or like commissions or even invitation for an open call with a very specific theme to relate to in our creation, in our work. And I think it's a very personal transformation journey, but at the same time, I would tell you that picking camel hide from Al Ain, driving to Al Khazna Tannery, was a complete coincidence. It was actually almost an accident that I came across, and I felt so much emotions towards the material. To begin with, the material felt like a rebirth after death. To me, it was a second chance to show this material. And to me, I felt like it was very personal, regardless of just talking out loud, if the camel hide was, maybe my story was that I traveled to Oman or I traveled to Saudi Arabia and I found that and I'm sourcing it out from those years from there, then that would be my story. But I think to answer the idea of like, is there pressure? I think it's very personal from one artist to another artist. Not all my work has to do with identity, and not all my work is related to, let's say, the material of camel hides. Actually, a lot of my inner dialogues, a lot of my explorations and expressions have to do with vertical and horizontal lines. And vertical and horizontal lines is a very philosophical way of representing my work that I go on research about, references, trial and error, trying to understand why am I obsessed with vertical and horizontal line. But from there starts the geometric world, and the geometric world has a sphere to it. And I'm also doing work related to spheres and geometric shapes. So that would be the inner dialogue. But then I think as I stand there in certain places around the world, I would say when I was in Vienna, I was more the Arab artist. And when I was in Saudi, I was the Emirati artist. And when I'm in UAE, I am the artist from Dubai. So I left that sort of labeling for the people, honestly, and it allowed me to be more free in my expression. So I always say, one day I'll be just hiding in my studio painting and maybe not represented by anyone and just doing what I really feel like doing. Not that anyone is putting any pressure, to be honest with you. I think it comes with a certain responsibility, and it happens that I am today sitting here and standing and talking. And there are a lot of artists that don't talk, for example. They don't sit and discuss and be in a panel discussion. And I appreciate that and I respect it so much. Do I always like to talk? Not really. I'm an introvert in real. I spend a lot of time just on my own being that artist. And in certain times I try to be out there because maybe someone wants to listen to what I have to say. Thank you.
Of course we want to listen to you, Zainab. So you beat me to it, but I was about to invite everyone if they have any questions for the panel. We have...
So first I wanted to thank you. It was a very interesting discussion. I think I've been to a lot of museums because I live in Sharjah, but I don't think I know much enough yet about local art. So I wanted to ask, we talk a lot about how art creates the culture, but I wanted to ask about how art in the local context, in the UAE context, like keeps us rooted in our culture, especially as the UAE opens itself up to the world. And also given that for a very long time, the Gulf was represented like by Western voices and by Orientalist voices. So I was wondering how art works to keep us rooted and kind of go against Orientalist voices.
I'll take this question, maybe from an art history perspective. But I mean, I face the same thing. We go to museums. Alhamdulillah, and we're very privileged to go to international museums, also local museums. And the minute you see, I mean, you know, an artist from your home country and your hometown, you're reminded of where you come from and the reality you've lived. Not in all cases, but in most cases. I think an example of that would be Farah Al-Qasimi's recent works at the Tate in London. I haven't been, but I've seen it on Instagram, and it's very relevant to the realities we've lived. So to see the foreign audiences react to that is in itself a reminder of where we come from and how important representation is, as much as I think from an artist's perspective this changes, but from an art history perspective it is very relevant. I think throughout studies as well, I've reverted back to a lot of international museums' collection databases, and they're still categorized by medium, size, provenance, but also nationality of artists. And the minute you click on Emirati artists, they're not a lot, but you do find a good amount of Emirati artists represented internationally. And it was very interesting to see where they came from. And in terms of, I will get a bit technical here, but when you talk about provenance and acquisitions and how they came to be a part of international museums and international collections, unfortunately, most of them were through patronage and donations, and not necessarily acquisition policies that were, you know, embedded by these foreign museums or Western museums. And in my context, I researched the French museums, for instance, the Modern Art Museum in Paris, the Google Institute du Monde Arabe is a very excellent example, but they do very intentional acquisitions. But other institutes were, you know, have represented Emirati artists through donations or patronage. And I think we come back to this idea of how important that is to represent your own identity. You want to speak your truth. You want your artists to tell their stories and what they have to say, rather than, you know, the other way around, where it's kind of a forced narrative in terms of curation and having an Arab artist being represented as a number, you're ticking a box, Arab artist as a part of an exhibition. So I think, I mean, it works both ways, but it is a reminder of where you come from, whether you're viewing it in your hometown or abroad. I don't know if Dr. Khawla or Zainab, you have anything to add to this. I hope I answered your question.
I remember an incident that happened really in front of me. There was this acquisition team, and there was a person who who had like an artwork, not an artwork, it was a piece of metal And he had this. He wanted to sell that piece of metal because he said that this is part of it's like an ancient, piece of metal. And then the team was a local team. It was actually in Qatar, and they just looked at the metal piece and just smiled. And I just looked at them, and they said, "This is not a real, not an artifact. It's not a real artifact." I said, "Oh, how do you know this?" By only looking at it. And this is when you know how the locals are very connected to where they come from, and they really, when they get all the tools, they get all the expertise, they really know what they're doing. Because they're also connected to the place, and connected to the pieces, connected to the locations, connected to the objects. And one of the guys just clicked on a button on the screen, and then I saw that metal piece on the screen. And it had nothing to do with the information that was given on a piece of paper with that object. They actually did a database of all the streets in Doha, where they collected and documented all the street signs. That was a street sign from the 60s. So he wanted to sell that as a piece. And this is when one of the examples, a very small example that tells you how when you have a local working on archiving artwork, it really it's very connected to them.
Another question. Shamma, I want to ask you about Maktoum's work. Maktoum has identity. Maktoum's work is always fascinating me, his work. He's very young, and what we have seen is all these camel bones and so forth, but there's something very specific about his work that is not necessary, even though it's Emirati, but it's very contemporary and very conceptual. And he's very young. He's 26, 27? Could you give us a little bit more information about his work and how he has stayed within his feeling as an artist, but he's connected to that subject?
Of course, she's referring to a dear colleague and friend of mine, Sheikh Maktoum bin Marwan Al Maktoum's artworks. He's been practicing art for a few years now. I don't feel qualified enough to talk on behalf of him for his artwork. I think an artist should speak on his own behalf. But I've had the privilege of working with him and seeing his artworks at the public libraries, but also in Abu Dhabi. He's presented and exhibited a few times. He's a very promising artist, so I hope, inshallah, in his next presentations and exhibitions, you'd get a bit more of a glimpse to his artworks. But I apologize, I don't feel qualified enough to talk on his behalf, but very interesting. Thank you.
I can answer, but not about Maktoum's work, but this is regarding, the advisories that we have, locally and regionally. This is for you, Mariam, from Iris Projects. Iris Projects have also young Emirati artists who are they're representing. And I feel it also the platform, it's not just the artist, it's a platform that looks into the artwork and values it from their measures. I think that also helped endorse also the young artists. So it's not age, it's not the material they're using. I think it's when you really study well the artwork that they're looking at and how you're going to put it on a different level. Salem is one.
Actually, Salem he's emerging, but not so emerging in his ideas. And also, Maktoum is very specific. For me, because I've worked for 35 years in arts as art curator, but he's very specific. Shamma doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know if Zeinab can tell us a bit more about it, about what you think as a person, as an artist, about what you see about Maktoum's work.
I think, I will just generalize in a certain fact which I've noticed within what we call, in case of the title of the session, which is Arab art, is that I think the younger generations are able to individually express themselves without necessarily making it related to all of the checklist. You know, this is what I find is fascinating and interesting, and I'm learning a lot actually as an individual. Not that there is much of a year difference, but what I mean is that I think individuals, younger individuals, practicing artists are able to say, you know, I'm an abstract artist and this is my medium, or you know what, I enjoy watercolor. Actually it's a very spiritual dialogue that comes into my head, and this is what I'm painting. To be honest, like I think that in itself is that just that the person is in tune with their truth. And if I have to go a few years back, I realized that I kind of picked up on the same pattern. It was just I was not courageous enough, or I never had the opportunities or even sometimes the funding to make the things that I'm maybe doing right now, because I've always wanted public art. I've actually used to speak to Dubai Arts and Culture a lot about we need public art, and I still remember that my first public art piece was actually in Sikka Art Fair back in 2012. And so you see, I think it's really very different from one individual to another, you know, especially, you know, and especially for artists. I think, you know, it can be, I can tell you, you know, I can go very deeply about how my work is related to my personal experience and trauma, but, you know, we don't want to go there right now because this is a different topic. So I think, it's part of our creation as individuals, you know. Even non-artists are creating, you know, writing poems. I always say that I want to write a book, but I need a ghostwriter because I can't write in that intellectuality. But I know how to express myself in my art, and you know, we kind of echo each other.
So we'll take one last question and we'll wrap it up. Oh, okay.
I just came from my family house, and I saw big canvases that
Dr. Khawla is an artist and painter.
Was. I feel that there was a time when I was very interested in art. I still am. But I mean that practicing art. Yeah. But then I realized that I think I'm very interested in a different field, which is maybe documenting art. I feel this is the lack that we were saying, which is the lack of scholars in this field, the lack of, you know, people who actually document, have the tools, have, you know, the expertise in this. And I realized that I think I am also more stronger in this field because really I really focus on identity, Emirati identity and the Gulf in general. And I feel I want to do this because we don't have enough people doing this. This is why I said, I think artists from this region, you'll always find that, you know, this identity resemblance in their work. They always somehow be connected to that. I remember when I first looked at Mona Hatoum's work, and I realized that, you know, even in the Arab world, we use different elements and mediums, you know, when we express ourselves. We don't all talk about identity. Sometimes it's miseries, sometimes it's personal, you know, issues. And I remember when I saw her working with her own hair. And that was, you know, very shocking for me. And she would, you know, work with barbed wires. This is something also a medium that is very new to me. So I think I got more interested in really studying more about the, you know, Arab art. and documented for future generations.
I think just to add on, like any living contemporary artist in today's world, including, you know, I went to the Pompidou and I saw Manhattoum's solo show there, and I was like mesmerized and so proud in that moment that everyone that walked into this show, you know, Manhattoum being a Palestinian, I was watching her documentary and probably like the only person crying in the room. But in that moment, all I was thinking, I was like, she's just a genius. She is so genius in shocking, looking at those mixed like emotions and you know, just being very proud of that issue and identity. So I think as an advice or as in just like something that I learned myself is that, you know, to be a little bit courageous enough and like express yourself in your own way, but not, you know, like elements of your daily life and like identity are just like all around us, you know. I worked with oil barrels and like merged them into camel hides, and, you know, sometimes I get asked like, what happened to the camels? You know, it's like, we ate them, you know, because it's the truth. You know, they come from slaughterhouses in Al-Ain, and when we celebrate, we eat camels. Did I ever eat a camel? Not yet. Maybe I'll be invited to eat a camel. But then it doesn't make me inhuman to, like, you know, we talk about...
This is the culture within a culture.
Yeah, this is why we, you know, sometimes say, you know, I could possibly eat a camel, but I could never eat a horse. But then, you know, people from Kazakhstan eat horses and they cherish them and they love them. So I think we need to always remember, like, as human beings, we are very dominant. You know, we pick and choose and like mix things the way we think. And I talk about it in my work. You know, it's always about man-made versus natural, and it's all about. My work is all about human interference. So whatever I'm gonna lay my hands on next time, as a human being, I'm very selfish to take it and turn it into art. But I say selfish as a general fact, you know, as what we do as human beings. You know, we probably, I don't know, maybe in the past, at some point we had to create colors, and we created colors from natural objects, but today we make them out of certain chemicals. I don't know, you know, that's what we do to tell our stories.
I remember this is just one point. I remember this is part of your question as well, answering your question. When you look at artists like Mahmoud Saeed from Egypt, and you look at his artwork, he always you know, resembled the Egyptian identity and history in all of his artwork. Nobody questions identity when he does it. There's always a question of identity, I feel, when it's about the Arab Gulf. Is it you feel, I don't know, I always have this, I always see it. There's always no question when an Egyptian artist does it, when he talks about his culture, but it's always, you know. No, there is one artwork that he actually talks about Al-Ghaf, which is a tree. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I believe like each artist has their own, we were talking about the collective and the individual, and sort of that is a bigger dialogue, I believe, that, you know, constitutes, and what it does, it actually enriches also the different artworks that are produced, I think, and, you know. I will just give a chance to someone at the back that has raised their hand for quite a bit. So
first of all, thank you so much for the amazing panel, and it's been very insightful. My question is, I know we're focusing a lot about the art itself, but my question is maybe a bit more general. What are the things that, as a young artist or as an Arab artist, should be looking for in the venue of the art being showcased, the exhibition or the venue itself, instead of the actual art?
What was the question again?
what, as an artist, what should they look for in a venue showcasing the art that they're producing, or an exhibition?
Exhibition spaces or spaces they'll be showcasing it. So I think if I understand correctly, it's the spaces that they'll exhibit, whether it's public
Yes.
art, for example, spaces that are here in the UAE or spaces abroad.
Yes.
I feel they should look at platforms that will, value their artwork. They can see examples of their previous, artists who they, collaborated with or represented. I feel that you can know a space when they use, I don't know if Zeinab would agree with me, if they use like correct terms when they're representing their artists. For example, they don't say talent. It's an artist, to have the right value for this artist. And I feel that spaces that are connected to, like, for example, research spaces or, have that, education side of them. I think these spaces are those that an artist should also really look into.
Thank you.
So I think, if I understood your question, in my humble opinion, I think younger artists should just be able to find a way in today's life to create and just make work and not wait for opportunities, but actually try to understand themselves more through their work, through practice. Because I think what happened in the past couple of years is that we graduate and then either we continue our studies and do our masters and then come back and wait for the next opportunity or wait for the next exhibition or wait for the next commission. And learning from the different generations, including, I always, we have this conversation with Muhammad Kadhim, for instance, and he said, you guys don't wake up and practice art. You don't wake up and make art. You wake up and think. And that's one way to look at it. But my answer to him is that, Muhammad, we're very distracted. It's true, we are overwhelmed, we're distracted, we're, like whether it's like as simple as scrolling into your phone or like spending a couple of hours making art. I would like to see more artists just making art, not caring who is approving their work. That's it. That's it.
I think I'll add on to that because we've seen a lot throughout the platforms at Dubai Culture where we have the spaces, we have the public libraries, but we also have the platforms and other exhibition spaces. The most recently is the Shandagha historical neighborhood. Who would have thought that we'll be occupying these late 1800 houses, which have once served peoples and families and very important trade routes and the royal family in general within the context of Shandagha, but also the alleyways and the creek in general, Al Khor. I think maybe an advice from experience would be do not create an artwork for the space. Do your work and the space will find you. I think it works also the other way around when you're commissioned as an artist for site-specific areas. So there are 2 routes or multiple routes, I'm sure, where you can look at whether you're commissioned specifically for a site or a location, or you just create a work and you find a home for it. So I think that's the way to go about it.
Thank you, thank you.
So with this, I think we conclude this session, which was, I wish we can go on for a little bit more, but maybe we can take it off the stage with everybody. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to our panelists. Thank you.